All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar hosted by the International Solar Energy Society, ISES, together with the Global Solar Council. We are very pleased to have all of you here, and we are especially happy to welcome our speakers and moderator for today who have taken the time to join us. Today's webinar will introduce the Global Solar Council, how the International Solar Energy Society is cooperating with the Council, and we will hear presentations on different focus areas of the Global Solar Council that covers it in its work. My name is Arabella. I am the Communications and Outreach Officer here at the ISES HQ in Freiburg, Germany, and I will give you a short introduction into ISES and the work we do, as we have many new participants joining us on the webinar today. Also joining us today is ISES President Dave Renee, who will give you a more in-depth intro into ISES in just a few minutes. The International Solar Energy Society ISES is a non-profit UN-accredited membership NGO. Our vision is 100% renewable energy for all, used efficiently and wisely. There are many benefits to joining ISES, and you can find out more on our homepage. Some of the benefits are the exclusive access to presentations and webinar recordings, such as today's, in the ISES webinar archive. ISES members can also get discounts and even free registration to ISES events and partner events. You can always find info about upcoming conferences and discounts on our website or contact us at public.relations@ises.org. Every month, ISES publishes a newsletter for our members where you can follow our progress and share your news. Members can also subscribe to our academic journal Solar Energy, which is our flagship publication. And in the ISES online bookshop, ISES members qualify for reduced prices on the different publications. So we welcome those who are not yet members to join today to support our work. For those who are already a member, we thank you for your support. Now, some brief information on the webinar and especially the Q&A section before we start. During today's webinar, our expert speakers will give their presentations, which will be followed by a Q&A section for you, the audience. For the Q&A section, we invite you to send in your questions, and we are looking forward to your participation. When sending in the questions, please write who the question is for and keep your questions short and precise. Please feel free to start sending in your questions anytime throughout the webinar. I am now happy to introduce ISES President Dave Renee, who will give you a further insight into the work we do here at ISES and on the cooperation with the Global Solar Council. Dave Renee is ISES President since 2010 and also holds a seat on the Global Solar Council Board of Directors. Dave also works as Associate Editor of the ISES journal Solar Energy. With his background in atmospheric and environmental science, Dr. Renee focuses his renewable energy career on developing and managing programs related to the assessment of renewable energy resources, with a particular emphasis on solar energy resources. Dave, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Arabella, and welcome everybody on this webinar. I just wanted to follow up with what Arabella said earlier about the International Solar Energy Society. We were one of the founding members of the Global Solar Council when it was first founded back at the Paris Climate Conference, COP21, in 2016. And ISES in particular wants to support the Global Solar Council in the area of technology innovation, especially solar energy technology innovation, as photovoltaic technologies become more and more embedded into the grid around the world and becomes more and more of a mainstream source of power, end-use electricity supply. So with that, I think it's very beneficial for ISES to have this connection with the associations and with the industry to better understand what their ongoing needs are going to be as solar becomes much more of a mainstream technology. And in addition, we hope to benefit the Global Solar Council with new findings about technology innovation, especially information that's being published in our Solar Energy Journal, which is one of the premier journals that's been around since back in the 1950s, actually, publishing research results on solar technologies. So with that, what I would like to do now is introduce our first speaker, Gianni Giannetta, who is the chair-elect of the Global Solar Council. I should just mention, maybe Gianni will also mention this, but I should just say that Pranav Mehta, who is the current chair, was unable to join the webinar because he had a conflict. He's very sorry he could not attend, but Gianni will be able to give us a more detailed description of the Global Solar Council. He's also vice president and head of the international affairs at Italia Solar, and he's co-founded the Global Network of National PV Associations, which has been the basis for the Global Solar Council and has played a very important role for the successful negotiation of 5 feed-in tariffs for Italy. So Gianni, thank you for being here today. I will turn the floor over to you so you can present the policy positions and recommendations of the Global Solar Council.
Hello, thank you for the kind introduction, Dave. Hello, everybody, and hello from beautiful island Helgoland in the middle of the North Sea. And I'm pleased to introduce Global Solar Council, which is, I hope you see my screen, which is the voice of the solar industry worldwide. It's a unique association that represents national and regional associations and corporate leaders from the solar PV market. Our mission is really to encourage a widespread adoption of solar energy through cooperation, education, and training. And our vision is to have at least 10 million solar jobs globally by 2030. You see here, anyway, a lot of course, industry association from all over the world. I would say that all the key markets in the world are here in, of course, in this unique association, the voice of solar industry. And of course, we have also some important global corporate as a member and also in the board of Global Solar Council. We have, of course, we are we started, as already was said, in COP21, and we have done a lot of progress during these years. As the unique voice of solar, we have established a very important strategic partnership with IRENA, with Clean Energy Ministerial, with the International Solar Alliance, with RAN 21, with the Terawatt Initiative, and with the International Desalination Association, which is the unique water association global. Our target is really, as I was saying before, really to create 10 million solar jobs by 2030, and we are already at 3 million, according to IRENA, solar jobs, and so these 10 million jobs anyway will result in trillions of dollars in long-term stable investments and multiple terawatt of PV generation. And but to achieve this goal, we really has to target some anyway. We have a policy position. We have some recommendations that governments, all stakeholders from the solar industry, has to follow. Going to the policy position, of course, anyway, nowadays. Really, the solar PV is a low-cost, reliable, and clean source of energy, and really we have to see the solar PV in its expected useful life. Solar PV is a proven technology. It's very old, and has a very really broad value chain. That means creating a lot of local jobs and local incomes, and really is the all renewables of course are very important to for the transition to a clean energy. Solar is really able to lead, of course, all the clean energies to, of course, take the place of fossil fuels. But unluckily, fossil fuels are really subsidized, and the CO2, the emission, the cost, the price, there is not really a cost for the CO2 emissions. And even if, of course, self-consumption is now a reality, and anyway, business people can become independent, but regulation is really not supporting this to happen. Of course, utilize solar PV can alleviate poverty in all the poor countries, in a lot of developing countries, I like to call like that, Africa and many others, and is the only solar energy that really, only source of energy that really, not the only one, but one of the best that can really include and create participation. Solar PV is very competitive to fossil fuels, something already very consolidated. And when we go to low-income communities and rural communities, of course, the only problem, of course, to face is the cost of capital, and government can do something for that, and also governments should, of course, promote rural electrification through innovative funding models, grants, and credit lines, and offering market need to be properly regulated. Solar PV generation actually don't need, of course, additional cost to buy the fuel, but of course there is no cost of fuel, and is a cost that can be fixed and can be planned and well known. The solar PV really can create the security of supply, is available everywhere, is reliable, anyway, we can really say that we can really know the price, can create the diversification of supply, and not nations can really not depending anymore from one source or import that create problem through each time there is a geopolitical problem, etc. And of course, of course, the sun is infinite anyway. So the having limited sources, or have the fear anyway that of course the fossil fuel will finish. Of course, it's not really supporting the growth of the great demanding that of developing countries that, or anyway, a developed society require. And also, of course, the potential is huge, even more if, of course, combine solar energy with other renewable energy sources, or if you couple with other sectors like heating, cooling, and mobility. And of course, we need to build capabilities in the solar sector, really to anchor the energy transition. We need really to do training, we need to train and have really strong stakeholder structures, and we really need to disseminate best practices. Only with an industry, a real strong industry representations that we anyway, and Global Solar Council is really gain really the unique voice, and without education facilities, without a competent regulators or institutions, academic institutions, really we cannot achieve all our goals, of course. And of course, we need to break barriers between private and public. We need to create the right environment to build private-public partnership, and is really key to increase international cooperations. And of course, we need to develop, implement, and promote internationally recognized solar codes and standards. Is really key to ensure quality. And once you have codes and standards in installation, buildings, grid integration, is the only way to really ensure efficiency, system compatibility, and of course safety. And anyway, to have to lower costs through harmonization, and also to through the code standards, of course, solar PV can give a bigger contribution in the whole energy system. And of course, we need to talk not only about technology, but also contracts. Anyway, there are a lot of legal costs, financial costs, and of course, having a standardization also in the contract really can facilitate the development and reduce the cost of the whole system. And the Global Solar Council is involved in an initiative with IRENA and Terawatt Initiative in a solar energy standardization initiative, really to bring together public and private sectors, stakeholders, to agree on the standard documentation that are acceptable by finance institutions. And having said that, with this background on the position, of course, we have identified 15 key recommendations for all the stakeholders, for governments, regulators, industry, grid operators, energy providers, and others. Of course, we need to redesign the markets in order to give equal equal access to PV, and of course to have markets that are appropriate for distributed generation. We need to remove the market distortion, like was mentioned before, the incentive to fossil fuel. We need to facilitate access to finance through incentivization schemes like feed-in tariff, reverse auctions, PPAs, grants and loans. We need to implement stable and consistent regulatory environment. We need to remove restrictions on solar when we talk about self-consumption. Of course, to see the solar, we need to see solar together with energy storage. We need to build, reintroduce building codes that incorporate PV. We need to really transfer the grid in order to really to encourage the diversified mix of renewable generation technologies such as solar, and we need really use the government financing instruments and capacity to mitigate risk, to lower the cost of capital, and a way to that this will help the scalability of investment in renewable energy. We need to, of course, to involve the local financials, the local institutions, local government, local communities, that they need to become need to participate in the renewables energy investment. It's important to create facilities to scale up on the investment in renewable energy. And education is very important, information to finance, insurance, regulatory and certification bodies. And the GSC want to really target this as a key priority, and we need the support of all sectors and governments for Global Solar Council to be successful in this sense. We need really the cooperation of everybody. And of course, as I was saying before, really establish public-private partnership. This is one recommendation, one of the key activity of Global Solar Council, breaking barrier between public and private. And we need, very important, we need to give a price to carbon, a price to CO2 emission, really to levelize really the energy market. We need a real exit strategy from fossil fuel. We don't need to transition from other fossil fuel, but we are ready to go directly to clean energy, to renewables. We need to recognize the added value of solar PV and all and promote innovative technologies that help to stabilize the grid, the system, the market. We need to develop the next generation transmission distribution mini grid that need to be redesigned for distributed renewable energy. This is my side. Thank you very much. And yes, and so I give you the word again to Dave for the next speaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Gianni, for your very interesting and thorough introduction to the Global Solar Council. As you can all see, the Global Solar Council expects significant growth in photovoltaic industry over the next decade. And in fact, this growth is really urgent due to the climate mitigation changes or climate mitigation actions that have to be taken as was described in the Paris Agreement, the same at the same conference in which GSC was formed. And I should also point out that the GSC will be holding a series of webinars each year. We probably will try to have maybe 3 webinars per year. This is the first one. ISES is hosting this webinar, and we're very pleased to be doing that. And future webinars will also be announced through the GSC as well as through its member organizations such as ISES. So for those of you who join this webinar because of your connection with ISES, you will also be made aware of future GSC webinars regardless of who is hosting them through our mailing list. And I think the other 2 things that Gianni's excellent presentation really highlighted is that there's 2 basic areas that are going to be very important for outreach from the Global Solar Council. One of them, of course, is on the reporting of markets and market opportunities and the status and trends of solar energy. And the other will be on technology innovation. And ISES, of course, is through its membership and through its position on the board of directors of the Global Solar Council will hopefully be helping very much in that latter category on technology innovation.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thanks for the invitation to ISES, the Global Solar Council. We're, as Solar Power Europe, are also a founding member of the GSC, and we're actually happy to have the first chairman coming from Solar Power Europe. If you don't know us, Solar Power Europe is the association representing the German solar sector, and we represent solar companies all along the value chain, and also adjacent sectors such as storage, heat pumps, electric mobility, name it, there will be for sure a member of ours. Just let me give you a short snapshot of the global market outlook. That's our flagship. Okay, so just want to give you a snapshot on our flagship publication, the Global Market Outlook. And to be honest, we're still modeling the 5-year market forecast, which is really not easy this year because you probably know that China last year started a restructuring program, and as the largest market, responsible last year for about half of the global demand. We really have to see what that means. There are positive signs, but and everyone is optimistic that the new program will finalize be soon, but it is delayed again and again. So our publication, which will be published at Intersolar in 3 weeks, is pretty close. And yeah, so we hope that that we will get some more insights so that they finalize it before. Otherwise, you have to bear with our estimates. Okay, just a short overview. Starting with the good news from last year. And the good news is that Europe is back on track. I think Europe was for quite some time the how you call it, maybe the thick man of solar for many years, but that has changed. So especially in the EU 28, the market grew by almost 40% last year to 8 gigawatt after hardly any growth in the year before and a several year decline before that. And you see actually that if you look at Europe as a whole, there was also nice growth. There was actually also quite impressive growth the year before, from 16 to 17, and less growth to 2018. So why that? The reason is that Turkey, which for historical reason we consider a European market, was in 2017 Europe's largest market, while due to the financial crisis, the market pretty much collapsed and was only 1.6 gigawatt in 2018. And that's the reason why Europe, in comparison to the EU, actually didn't perform as well. If we look at the EU market and our forecast, you see that sorry, I'm just you see that the actual installation basically almost met what we forecasted. That's this here in blue, and that the forecast for the next 2 years is pretty optimistic. So this is our forecast from the 2018 GMO, and here you simply see that we really assume the gray line is our medium scenario, that the market will be 13 gigawatt at least. It could be also higher, also lower. So in our current modeling, we are much more upbeat actually, both for 2019 and for 2020. So there are actually several reasons why this is the case. I will come back to that later. Let's look at global for the time being, and you simply see that that the market in 2018 grew only a little bit. Actually, I took out the numbers for one reason, because that was the first estimate from March. So we at that time we published that the market would be around 104 gigawatt. I think you see the red part, which is rest of the world, because there were a lot of assumptions. As I said, we're currently modeling. We think it was probably not as big as it looks at the moment, probably rather 102 or so. That's actually what we also originally forecasted in comparison to the 99 gigawatt that was installed to 2017. So there was just a little bit of growth. We don't know how much it was. If you look at the different analysis from different forecasters, you see, for example, IHS at 104 gigawatt at the moment. Bloomberg is even more positive for 2018, while the IEA PVPS at the moment is under 100 gigawatt. I think we will not end up there. It will be probably around 102, 103. But again, we're still in the modeling phase at the moment. If you look at the cumulative, again, not the numbers, not the detailed numbers, but what you can see for sure, that we will have finally reached half a terawatt of installed capacity. So 3 reasons solar will thrive and is thriving. One is obviously the quickly decreasing cost. I think I advise everyone to look every year at the Lazard Capital LCOE update. So that's a slide from Lazard, and from their November 2018 forecast or analysis, and there you see that solar is at the same level at wind. So sometimes it's cheaper, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive. In Europe, for example, it's often cheaper. Solar has won a couple of the tenders that recently took place in Europe, the technology neutral tenders, but it depends on the conditions. Still, of course, as time goes by, for sure, solar will be the lowest cost technology, beating everyone, simply because you can see that from the curve. Although it is a bit flattening, it continues to go down. Next to cost, there's another driver, and that driver is policy. On that slide, you simply see the policy driver in the last year and the coming 2 years for the European Union. We have 2020 binding renewable energy targets, and on that slide, you can simply see that 17 out of the 28 member states of the European Union have still not met their RES target. So what are they doing? They now actually focus on solar because solar is so cheap. You could see that in Germany, for example, which when the new government took place, they started a special tender capacity for solar. You can see that in several other countries. Spain, which will likely be the largest market in Europe this year, did a big tender, was a technology neutral tender, and the second one of these, solar won almost everything. That was close to 4 gigawatt. So that and the driver here again was the 2020 targets, and you see that in other countries. Hungary, for example, in Europe is one of the big markets. They installed over 400 megawatts last year, and also Hungary is, although they are just meeting their targets now, there the driver was clearly this 2020 targets. But this is just about Europe. The same is true for most other countries. Policy still plays a big role. We see more and more people, companies talking about subsidy-free solar. Yes, there is space for that. Solar gets cheaper. We are more competitive than most other technologies in many regions, but subsidy-free only works, and you always have to say that when you talk about subsidy-free solar, if the playing field is level. So that means if the framework conditions really work, otherwise it doesn't work. So this is very important to say. And as we could see also in China, the reason the Chinese market dropped is simply because the government cut the subsidies. The feed-in tariff for the large-scale solar systems was simply stopped, and the market dropped basically, close to nil in the third quarter. The final driver at the moment in the short run actually is, and this is also cost related, that is corporate sourcing. We simply see in the EU where corporate sourcing wasn't so big in the past. It is coming again, also because policy is creating the right policy framework. We had last year and this year the clean energy package being passed, or the different directives of that, and one of the topics in this clean energy package was also corporate sourcing. So the administrative barriers for development of corporate PPAs were removed. And there was also some clarification on issuing guarantees of origins, which companies need. But what you can see on that slide is that the driver at the moment in this field is the US, where a lot of the big corporations go for PPAs, while Europe and Asia Pacific are lagging somewhat behind. But again, also there you could simply see that both in Asia and in Europe and Middle East, the demand has doubled for corporate sourcing over the last year from 2017 to 2018, and this steep trajectory is anticipated to continue. So this just as a brief snapshot from our global market outlook. We will launch the GMO at Intersolar on May 14th at 11:30. There's a session on European solar markets, and you are very welcome to join that session. And there we will provide you much more details and then our final numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. The global market outlook put out by Solar Power Europe every year is a really valuable contribution to the solar community. I certainly use the information that's provided in it quite frequently myself. I think it's very exciting to see this this new information that's coming in, and I look forward to the launch of the next report in just a few weeks in Munich. I think it's very significant. We reached kind of a milestone of a 1/2 terawatt installed capacity. That's really good news, along with the price reductions that Michael has clearly shown that are occurring within the photovoltaic sector. Obviously, the energy transformation is occurring, and the introduction of solar into the energy system at large quantities now is very important. But the future, to have a fully decarbonized system, the future is going to require many, many terawatts of PV installed. So that's going to be our next challenge, is to how to make this happen. And especially since the electricity sector is the most rapidly growing of all end-use energy sectors. And as we see the transport sector electrifying, and even the heating and cooling sector electrifying. So our next speaker is going to be Xavier Deval, and he's going to give us a very interesting talk on some of the innovations that are taking place in the photovoltaic sector. That's going to be very important in order to achieve this, or to have a successful transformation of our energy system. Xavier is a founder of CEO of Kilowatt Sol, which advises on solar PV and storage technologies. He's also the director of the Global Solar Council, a director of the Global Solar Council, and a vice president of SER, the French Renewable Energy Industry Association. So in this presentation, he's going to address the dual stress of a fast-growing global population and global warming, and posing a new approach towards energy, giving a series of examples of today's and tomorrow's applications, such as bifacial or floating PV. And his presentation will illustrate some of the technology milestones paving the route of the solar solutions of the future. So Xavier Deval, thank you for your participation today, and I look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you very much, Dave, for the kind introduction. Can you see my screen? I'm not sure.
Yes.
We see your screen. Yes.
The one with the slide?
No, the one with the
no.
background.
So how do I change? Is it this one? No. No, that's me. Give me a second. We're gonna do this way. Up. Let's be reactive and start again. Can move this here and share. Gives us time for the slides to arrive to everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Very quickly on Kilowatt Sol, we are technical advisory. We are based in France, so of course we are quite active in the French market, but we also work on a global basis. And the team here is very international, because out of 12 persons, we have 5 nationalities, and we try to blend our technical skills with a lot of IT, as in order to support the needs of our clients. Once upon the time, in the starry sky of 1958, another satellite is now orbiting around the Earth. But the difference with Sputnik, launched something like 6 months before, who only beeped for 22 days, this time Vanguard is not only powered by chemical batteries, but is also using 6 solar cells, as you can see. And that allows these satellites to send his signal toward the ground for the next 7 years. Something that I believe the NASA people were not anticipating. There were no button to switch it off. I want to share with you today how fast, from this very old time, but I will just focus on the last years, how fast the technology is evolving, is taking into account novelties, and thanks to innovation. I will be illustrating my presentation with a few examples on modules, structures, devices for PV plants that I picked from a real assessment we perform, my personal experience as solar expert. They are not a comprehensive list of what exists, but just probably something to share with you the glimpse of the boiling and creativity of our industry. I do not intend to bother you with all the technology improvements that occurred inside the shop floors of the manufacturing sites. But definitely today, Tier 1 factories are in the range of the gigawatts of annual capacity and can be considered as fully automated. So don't count on solar factory to create a lot of jobs, definitely not. But the question for me is more to assess that those industrial vehicles are now ready to process a lot of volumes and to accept any, I would say, incremental improvement based on the same principle of square cells side by side, framed between two pieces of material. I want to start my presentation with this first example. It's a bus bar. For those of you not very familiar with solar technologies, a bus bar is the electrical mean to carry out the electrons that have been put in motion by the photons or by the sunlight at the surface of the solar cell. As you can see on the bottom picture, unfortunately, we need the piece of metal to carry out the electrons, but this piece of metal is also a shadow at the surface of the active cells. And interestingly, for many years, we've been using 3 bus bars, and with Q cells, for instance, it took 5 years to assess or to decide to move from 3 to 4 bus bars with thinner layers, more bars but thinner on the cells. And the gain at this level is 15% increase. And 15% is a huge amount of gain when we consider our industry. Then it took another 2 years, and they introduced what they call the fancy fork, but it means that actually instead of putting flat on the top surface their bus bars, they put it vertical inside the material. And it took after another year to move to what is now becoming more and more mainstream, is the multi-bus bars, both on polycrystalline and monocrystalline cells. The next example is related to PERC technology. We probably, most of you have heard about the PERC technology. If we look at the figures, and thank you, Michael, for the previous presentation on global market, we need the statistics to understand, to better understand our market. In 2015, which can be considered as the real year for mass production of this innovation, they represent 5% out of a market which is in the region of 51 gigawatts. It means that this is 2.55 gigawatts of PERC technology, which is manufactured over the year 2015. And what is interesting is when we look at where we are today. Last year, PERC now represents 35% of a market in the region of 100 gigawatts. It means 35 gigawatts of PERC modules released by the market, 14 times more than 3 years ago. So this is quite impressive to see that as soon as something works, the complete industry is endorsing the innovation, and so the amplification factor is very rapid. I just want to highlight the fact that when the local policy strategy is smart, like the top runner strategy that was implemented in China, is also a very strong booster of such improvements. PERC, for all of you maybe not familiar, is a very, very strong innovation that actually dated from 1983. It came out of the lab of Martin Green at New South Wales University. So what is interesting here to see is that our industry has been working on innovation anywhere. And today, as we get closer and closer to some sort of limit, we are now trying to add all the little pieces available in the technology to make the product better. The next probably step toward improvements is definitely bifacial. Because at the end of the day, once again, when you look at those modules, we're looking actually at the back face of the module, but on the form factor point of view, they are not so distant from traditional modules. So you can use the same factory and you can now do something where the back face is also contributing, not only the front face, but the back face as well. And the main difference is that instead of a glass foil sandwich, you make a glass sandwich. So I would say probably one technical challenge is the lamination process, but for the rest, it's very like what is done with conventional modules. And in this race toward always better, always more efficiency, the question is, what is the limit? Because we all dream of converting 100% of the light, but what the physics is telling us. Actually, a few years after the satellite was launched, a team of scientists headed by Nobel Prize and father of the Silicon Valley, William Shockley, associated with Hans Quasar, they processed, I would say, the first demonstration of the physical limitation of a photovoltaic phenomenon. And at this time, the phenomenon was 33.7%, as they demonstrated. Since then, there's been some release improvement, even though it's still called Shockley-Quasar limit. The new updated value is more in the region of 29.4%. So when you see that today's product on the market, production products that you can buy from next door shop is in the region of 25%, it's easy to understand that we are now reaching the real limit if we talk about a single junction. Because the nice thing with photovoltaic technologies is you can now split your photons in range and let each of the range of photons do their job in order to increase. And when you look at that on the paper, the theoretical limit is 86% for an unlimited numbers of junctions. I don't think it's where we're going to do, but there is probably much more to do than the 30% limit we all talk about since several years. If we consider where the market is at the moment, this is an NREL document. Some of you might be familiar with this kind of graph, but most of the time it's at cells level, where this graph is at module level. So it's always interesting to compare. At the end of the day, this is module we install, not cells. It presents where the technology is, and obviously it's the 30% limit is obvious at the bottom, with several technologies already implemented, and above you have the multi-junction solutions. This is where we are, but one technology that definitely deserves to be looked at as what I call, I would say, sort of deal breaker, or game changer is definitely perovskite. Perovskite has been introduced just a few years ago, 5 years ago, and it's extremely promising. Probably not as a standalone technology, but very much as the sidekick of silicon in tandem solution or in other sorts of multi-technology solutions. If now we move beyond the module itself, I would say it's also interesting to see how the rest of the plant has changed or benefits from the creativity of innovations. This is me in Germany in 2008, and as you can see, at this time, the PV structure was extremely heavy. It was relying on existing metal pieces that were assembled, put together to hold the system. Just in a comparison, in 10 years' time, we're now with another example of extremely light structures. I refer to, just have a look if you want to know more about this one, but just what is I think is important for us to appraise is the fact that we are renewable energies. Hence, we are responsible for our carbon footprint. And metal is a lot of carbon. Hence, every time we may have the nicest technology, if to put it into situation, into context of operational plant, we have to use carbon for other parts. At the end of the day, we become carbon generators, so we have to be very careful. So I wanted to highlight this. If we move to another way to look at innovation, or another driver of innovation, is definitely the scale. This plant I had the pleasure to visit is the largest one I visited. It's spread over 150 kilometers. So of course, this is not the kind of plant I dream to have next door in France, in front of my house, and this is definitely a plant at the scale of the Chinese market. But what I wanted to say is, once the challenge of the engineers in charge of this kind of development is to implement such a power system, they have to think big. And when you think big, you have to rationalize a lot of things. And among rationalization, this is another plant. This one is only 1 gigawatt size. Is the fact that if you have something extremely big, you have to reduce the number of cables. And one way to do that is to mutualize your power line to retrieve the electrons generated by the solar cells and to use it as your communication bus as well. And that's a smart way when you use power line carriers technology, PLC technologies, to do so. What I like with this kind of technologies is, at the end of the day, what becomes critical is no longer the inverter itself, but it's first of all its ability to communicate, to talk one with another. If you swap one system by another one, it's like a node in a network, and they have to talk and know that a new node is in the network and is replaced and so on. So definitely the core has to be communication. On the top of the core, you have apps like you would have on your cell phone. And maybe one app definitely is the DC-AC conversion, because at the end of the day, we talk about inverters. That's the minimum job. You can have another one that could be in charge of storage or something else. You can have apps that will be processing actuators. On the one plant I visited, for instance, the inverters are controlling the horizontal trackers. So you don't double the system, you combine everything. And that's probably another trend we're going to see in our industry, is smart systems controlling everything. Last but not least, it's about operation of the PV plants. If you have plants of this size, it's impossible to imagine that you can monitor the plants with a guy, walking one by one the rows of modules to look at them, not when it's 150 kilometers long. So you have to think it another way. And this is where also innovation coming from the manufacturers. I mentioned here the Huawei, for instance, they introduced the IV curve. So it allows the inverter to read string by string the IV curve profile, and from this kind of analysis to detect any default. And on the other side, something else I've seen is this kind of a docking station for drones, which are dispatched across the plants. And at nighttime, they fly with a chartered course, and they know what they have to look at. And it's every night another row, another row, another row. And they have the capability to scan the plants either in infrared or electroluminescence to detect the default and do this process. As a conclusion, I just would like to share that technology is nothing. What is important is that we have the faith in the people, says Steve Jobs. And definitely, what I like is our industry is gifted of plenty of talented people, which are spread across the full value chain from our labs down to the project. And it's a real pleasure, and it's of course our role at the Global Solar Council to promote these talents to the rest of the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Xavier. That was a very informative and also quite entertaining presentation. It's clear that innovation doesn't just come with improving module efficiency. We may be approaching some limits there, but what's more important also, what's very important also, is that it comes with the whole balance of systems associated with PV design and installation methods, the communications techniques, digitalization techniques. And we're seeing the results are solar plants that are of the same scale and even larger scale than existing central station plants such as nuclear and coal-powered plants. So now what we will do is move into our question and answer session. Please let me remind everybody participating in the webinar that you can ask a question of any of the presenters in your question area of the menu that you have on your screen. And what I will do first of all is start with a question that came in early on actually I think it was addressed to Johnny, but it was basically let me just try to find it here quickly. I think it was basically, how can researchers contribute to the mission of the Global Solar Council? And I have some thoughts about that, but Gianni, first let you take that one on if you'd like. If you have any thoughts about that, and maybe summarize quickly what the Global Solar Council is in terms of a membership type organization, and how can researchers make sure that their work is being made available to the council.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Very important question. Anyway, research institutes, academia, universities has, of course, an important rules. Of course, Global Solar Council, as you said, to remind, is the association of all the national, regional solar PV industry associations and global corporates. Anyway, the rule, we recognize the rule of education, as I was mentioned in my presentation, is very important as well as the research of the innovation, of course, and we of course has to collect the best practice. Of course, at the moment we give visibility, of course, to innovative, interesting anyway solutions. But in the next evolution, could be to group together the most relevant research activities and try to, let's say, give the proper visibility and connection of good solution, and let the industry investors really to have a look on the potential of each proposal from the research institute. But I'm sure, Dave, you can integrate my idea, my position. Of course, Global Solar Council is really very focused at the moment, of course, in the lobby activities on with all the global institutions, but is really the voice of the solar industry, and and in the evolution of the Global Solar Council, this could be one of the point of the next board meeting, to really group, give value and voice, and create a connection between academia, universities, and the research institute. But maybe Dave, you can add something more as ISES also to this point.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. That's a good answer, and I'll just go ahead and reemphasize what you said. That organizations, well, first of all, the Global Solar Council is a organization of organizations. So, in other words, solar industry associations, solar societies, solar companies are all welcome to join the Global Solar Council. ISES is one of the societies. We aren't an industry organization. We're more of a research society, and we have the Solar Energy Journal, for example, is our premier journal publication. It's been around for many years, and so researchers can certainly have their work contributed to the Global Solar Council through member organizations such as International Solar Energy Society. So I encourage the questioner, as well as others on this webinar that have similar kinds of questions, to look at who are the current members of the Global Solar Council, because that also, if your organization is also a member of the council, then you are indirectly also a member of the council by coming in through that organization. So let me move on, unless I don't know if any of the other speakers would like to address that question. I will then move on to the next question. This is, here's a kind of a question and a comment provided by somebody. Does ISES, or maybe I should also say the Global Solar Council, use the Green Transition Scoreboard, which has been tracking annually since 2009 the total private investments and jobs globally in the green sectors? Our current cumulative total is $9.3 trillion in a 2018 report capturing carbon dioxide while improving human nutrition and health. This could be freely downloaded from the ethicalmarkets.com. Well, thank you for that contribution. I don't think ISES has been using that, but I'm certainly pleased to hear about it. Does anybody, do any of the other presenters, are you aware of this service? And do you have any further comments about this, this Green Ethical Markets product? Okay, hearing no further comments, thank you for your contribution. I think this is a very good information, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, and we'll certainly follow this as we go forward. Next question is regarding jobs. Maybe I'll direct this one to either Michael or Xavier or Gianni. Any of you can answer this, but how do you propose jobs in places like India to be created through advanced renewable energy? This is coming from a participant from India, and he's particularly interested in how photovoltaic technologies will create jobs in rural parts of India. Do any of our presenters have? Yes, please.
So projecting jobs is always complicated, but maybe something we should share with the audience is that we are changing the power source of the planet, and doing so, we are at the very early stage of this industry, and it means that a lot of applications of solar technology has to be invented. And the good thing is, because by essence, solar can be or is a distributed energy, it means that most of the job will be local, will be close to the point of usage of this energy. So, of course, maybe everybody's dreaming of the very fancy factory I showed in the picture. But the thing is, those factories will be a few. but after is all what will have to be engineered, completed, assembled, and maintained at point of usage. And this is probably where that's the largest part of job creation will exist. So sorry for our friend in India, I don't have a specific answer for rural India, but what I mean is very, very likely in the region he's living in, there's gonna have to be a few technicians understanding what's handling a few modules is, repairing them would be contributing to the cleaning process or campaign of collect or whatever. So there is a lot of on-site local job to invent, and most of them we don't even know them yet because not all the applications have been invented.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, that's Michael. I fully agree with Xavier, and as he showed in his presentation, on the more upstream you go, actually, I think the less job intensive solar is, but the more downstream you go, and rural is probably the furthest downstream you can go, the more job intensive is solar. And I think here we fare so much better than any other power generation technology, that this is a really compelling argument for solar that we really have to also use for lobbying purposes in each and every country, because that's the way to go. I think I'll give you one example where it probably didn't work so well. For example, in Europe, in Germany, 10 years ago, there were an incredible amount of jobs, and after the government cut the subsidies and the upstream sector also shrank, a lot of these jobs get lost. Today, Germany is talking about transition away from coal. The jobs that we're talking about here that are left are really a small portion in comparison to the jobs that were lost in solar. But nobody really talked in the media about losing jobs in a very innovative next generation sector, while the news were full in Germany of the few jobs in coal that are left that we're gonna lose when we phase out coal. So again, I think the point is here, local jobs are important jobs, and solar can play a big role here, and that's a big argument for going solar everywhere.
Yeah, thank you.
And also very.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just a very short addition anyway. For sure, solar PV and the job in solar PV. Solar PV, as I was saying, is very much linked with the other renewables. Is linked with heating, mobility, etc. And this kind of job are really high qualified. And anyway, for sectors that have not a start and an end, but really, anyway, as I was saying, anyway, this solar, electromobility, and all these topics, all these sectors are really could have no end anyway, and really investing in repositioning anyway in this field is a great opportunity, and represent a great opportunity for, let's say, a stable job. And there are a lot of, especially for people living not in towns, etc., in rural areas, internet nowadays is so comfortable, and there are a lot of webinars like these ones, and we, as Global Solar Council, we are trying to promote, of course, training also through webinars that can really support anyway who would like to reposition in the rural areas in these fields.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to highlight also that one of our participants, Hazel Henderson, I addressed one of her questions earlier about the green transition scorecard or scoreboard. She just commented that Ethical Markets Media is an organization that provides global distribution to educators and colleges. Information says is what we're talking about on jobs, and she fully supports this Global Solar Council. So thank you, Hazel, for your contribution there. Also, she asked a question about whether the PowerPoints will be available to viewers after the webinar. And yes, they will be available. Arabella will be able to give more information about that at the close of the webinar. A question here about the damaged or non-functional panels and other equipments that other equipment that's associated with the PV system. Can they be disposed of in an eco-friendly way? That's a very good question. What happens? How do we recycle the material coming out of plants where either there are failed systems or they are being replaced with updated systems?
Happy to answer. Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry. So I like this one because it's a typical question we get, like, you know, the solar systems cannot be recycled and so on. I just wanted to highlight the fact that if you look at what the content of most of the solar modules, when I say most, I talk about the silicon-based technologies, which are represent more than 90-something% of the market. We talk about a piece of glass, some plastic foil at the back, and in between, solar cells. Solar cell is silicon. Silicon is quartz. Quartz is sand. So, and there is a little of metal like silver, which are used for the bus bar I mentioned before. So at the end of the day, we talk about a lot of products which can be recycled. Actually, I don't know if this is implemented everywhere, but my understanding is that in Europe, we have to have the recycling program in place when the module are sold, which means that every time a client is purchasing a module, is paying the little tax that comes along to guarantee that this very module will be recycled, and it's already paid for. Recycling process. There's going to be some recycling factories. I had the chance to visit one of them. It's very interesting to see. It doesn't look very good when you look from the outside, because at the end you've got the big shredder which is matching the piece of module at the one side. But at the other side, when you understand the physics behind, which is able to sort and move the piece of metal on one side, the piece of plastic on the other side, and the sand on or raw material for glass that will be melted again to become glass again. This is impressive, and once again, a lot of technology innovations which are supporting the solar industry.
Good response. Are there other comments? Okay, then I have questions directed to Michael and to Xavier specifically. Can you give us some thoughts of the renaissance of the European PV industry, or the EU PV industry? Michael, we could start with you.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so we as Solar Power Europe, we have an industrial strategy task force, and we're really working. There's also a forum in the European Commission, which is looking into different technologies. There's something for batteries, something for renewable energies, on industrial strategy. So we as the sector are supporting that, and we recently also published that we think that there is space for production in Europe now that the market is coming back, because I think the first and important boundary condition is that there must be demand on the one side, and on the other hand, of course, you need support. And what the Chinese did very well, unlike we in Europe, where we lost the industry. Several, or I think let's not lost the industry, but lost at least the leadership in the production a couple of years ago, was that they simply identified solar as a strategic future technology, and they simply supported their companies, in particular with access to cheap financing. And that's in the end the key, because as Javier showed, and I think that is true more and more, it's not about labor. So that means even in Europe, where labor is, at least in certain countries, much more expensive than in China, and in others not so much, that factor doesn't really play into that equation anymore, because you have now cell factories where you really have a few people working, and module lines as well. Yeah, that's it. We need a big market that's coming. We have to, of course, make sure that that's sustainable, and we need better financing facilities. Javier?
Sorry, I was switching on. Yeah, in complement to Michael's comment, first we have to take back the manufacturing of this technology in Europe. And why? As Michael mentioned, it's not only a question of jobs in itself, but definitely if we don't have our hands inside the process, we have no chance to be part of the creation, innovation of the future technologies. Hence, our complete solar ecosystem relies on being also involved in the manufacturing. We cannot imagine a single instance that our research centers across all Europe will continue to be legitimate the day they will be 100% disconnected of any manufacturing. That could not exist. Nobody is crossing the world to get access to a piece of patent somewhere. You have to have this direct connection between manufacturing and research. So that's at the first level. Second is, maybe I was not clear with my message, but solar is coming. Solar is the energy of this century. And the volume which is coming is so large that at the end of the day, it's no longer a question of local manufacturing. The fact that any region will have their own, I would say, solar champion. Like automotive today, nobody's buying car from India, dropped to Argentina. It doesn't work this way. It means that there's going to be some manufacturing facilities dispatched in all the main regions, and we definitely have to. And I think that we must, just for one reason also, is if we are no longer involved in the manufacturing of this product, we may lose our seats, I would say, at the PV table of discussions. And that will be a shame, because we have to remember that Europe invested a lot of money. All the countries of Europe, mainly Germany, France also, but Italy and Spain, we spend a lot of our money into initiating the launch of the rockets. And that would be completely stupid that one day we would be excluded of a game that we have created. That will be a crime.
Okay, thank you. We should move on. We have quite a few questions coming in. I'm afraid we probably will not be able to get through all of them, although I encourage individual participants to contact the speakers individually after the webinar to address your questions to them. Here's one: how can we achieve the top number of PN junctions and get to the best efficiency in solar panels? And that is directed to Xavier. I think he's referring to that PN junction chart that you showed in your presentation.
How to? So once again, today we know how to, because we have done. I mean, there is already in different labs or at different level multi-junction PV. The best example is the one that we install on satellites. All the satellites are using today multi-junction PV cells, because you don't care to pay €1,000 per square meter module when it's saving a few kilos or tons on a satellite level. So of course the question is how we can access this kind of technology at maintaining the low cost of today's PV. What I foresee from my different visits in factories, in labs, whatever, is the tandem solutions are already there. We should see them popping out on the market in the next 2 years, because the machinery necessary to keep that process simple and compliant with manufacturing line that are existing is there. On the day the machines are there, it's very quick when it gets implemented, because at the end of the day, everybody is on the same race to drop the price, as we've seen in the past, as Michael has shown in his presentation. To maintain the drop of the price, you have two routes. The one route is to reduce the manufacturing cost. The other route is to increase the efficiency. And the two routes have been traveling together, and they will continue.
Okay, here's a question. Can there be more discussion of dispatchable backup to PV and, of course, wind? And how much could this backup come from biomass? So this is a question that could involve quite a bit of discussion. I don't know if anybody wants to take a quick answer to this on the dispatchability of PV, or how you can back it up.
Happy to answer. I just wanted to highlight, we talked, I imagine today's webinar is a global one. We talk to the world. We have to understand that the question of solar, the priority of solar is to deliver the products that can fuel the planet where there is people. I mean, Europeans, for instance, or Americans or whatever, we are very lucky. We have perfectly operating grids and networks and everything. That's fine. And we have big questions about backups and whatever. I just want to recall the fact that somewhere else in this planet, there is people starving for a few electrons. Backup is already luxury. First of all, we have to deliver electrons to the ones needing it to create economy, to support education, to support health and safety of the people first. After, we'll talk about backup. But yes, at the end of the day, of course, a backup solution around biomass, using hydropower, using a storage solution, batteries or whatever, they will come. They have to come. But I just would like to put things in the right perspective. The planet is first needing energy.
Thank you. That's a good response. And I think at this point, unfortunately, we have a few more questions here, but I don't think we have any further time to address them right now, because I believe we have to end the webinar in about 3 minutes. Arabella, I will turn this back over to you, but I first wanted to just thank all of the speakers and the participants for your presentations and for your excellent questions. And I will now go back to Arabella. If we have any more time for questions, we can take that on, but I think you have a few closing announcements to make yourself. Is this correct?
Yes, thank you very much, Dave. Yeah, so unfortunately, we're going to have to close the webinar very soon, as people are quite busy and we don't want to go overboard. But everybody, we have received all of your questions that came in, and we've collected them, and we will certainly pass them on to the panelist speakers, who will then have a chance again to come back to your questions and answer them, and we can provide this resource, of course, to you as well. So the Q&A section would now be closed, and I'd like to finish the webinar with a few last words. First off, there's quite an important event I'd like to highlight with you. It is the ISES Solar World Congress 2019, which is going to take place this year in Santiago, Chile, from November 4 to 7, and we very much invite all of you to join us there. As I said, ISES will be hosting the Solar World Congress, and the event consists of plenary speeches, presentations, forums, workshops, social events, technical tools, and more. And we host the Solar World Congress, and the Solar World Congress also takes place together with the 2019 International Conference on Solar Heating and Cooling for Buildings and Industry, and also will be joining the 9th International Conference on Solar Air Conditioning. That's the SAC 2019. So loads of resources coming to one place, and we very much invite you to visit the Congress homepages to stay up to date with the latest information. Registration is going to open later late this month or early May, so we are very much looking forward to seeing all of you in as many as we can in Chile. And now for some final words on today's webinar. There will of course be a webinar recording, and we will make it public on the ISES homepage in a few days. So please stay tuned, and this is going to be uploaded there very soon. For ISES members, please remember you already have unlimited access to all the past webinars and also all past presentations through the ISES members area. So log in to your account and you will have access there. And then as my final goodbye, on behalf of ISES and also certainly the GSC, we thank all of you. And of course, once again, our great set of speakers and of course our moderator for your participation in today's webinar. We are always looking forward to hear your feedback, so you can write to us at public.relations@ises.org, and we very much invite you to complete the survey that will be sent out to you as a follow-up to this webinar. So to all of you on the call, thank you again very much for joining us today. I will now end the webinar, and we wish you a great day wherever you are around the globe. Goodbye.